It's Debbie Potts, and I am bringing back a podcast interview I did last year on the wheat zoomer. So if you think you might have a sensitivity to wheat, gluten, how do you know? Stop guessing and start testing. Let's learn why.
Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie, and I just wanted to give you a quick little message from one of our sponsors, Element. It's spelled LMNT, but pronounced Element. If you haven't heard about this, Element is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means there's a lot of salt with no sugar, and it's formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited for those doing a keto, low carb, or paleo diet. And I think this is great for athletes, especially in the summertime and when you're training in warmer climates. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. None of the junk, no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers. That's it. I like the unsweetened one because the other flavors do have a little stevia, but stevia doesn't do well in my body. So I prefer the unsweetened Element. And I like the packets because I can throw them in my bike bag when I go on a long bike ride or when traveling. And I can just dump a packet in my water and it keeps me so much more hydrated. Because remember, we don't sweat out water, we sweat out minerals. So check it out. You've got a nice little gift from them if you use our discount code Drink Element. I'll put the link in the show notes. But using the code Low Carb Athlete, you get a free gift with purchase. You get a free Element sample pack with any order when you order with Low Carb Athlete on our special URL code. So support the podcast, support Element. It's backed by science and we love what they're doing. So try it out. What is the Wheat Zoomer? It's a panel that we use often as FDN practitioners and in functional medicine to assess your sensitivity to wheat, autoimmune disease, and intestinal barrier stability, also known as leaky gut. If you suspect that you have wheat sensitivity, celiac or non-celiac wheat sensitivity, multiple food sensitivities, leaky gut, autoimmune, and chronic inflammation, you may benefit from getting the Wheat Zoomer. But we don't just do one test as FDN practitioners. We love to see the whole picture and put the missing pieces of a puzzle back together again. We need to look at, 2 to 3 lab tests, even 3 to 5 lab tests to get an idea of what's going on from the inside out. So if you struggle with GI inflammation, excessive fatigue after meals, joint pain, lack of concentration, brain fog, diarrhea, bloating sensation, gas of any kind, nausea, headaches including migraines, neurological symptoms as memory loss, balance problems, numbness, tingling, and anxiety, eczema or psoriasis, low vitamin D status, this may be connected to having gluten in your diet. Now, we can find out some information in the Wheat Zoomer test by Vibrant America, or there's Cyrex panel you can do as well. They will test all sorts of different parts of wheat. Zonulin protein, anti-zonulin, anti-actin, anti-LPS marker, wheat germ, WGA, and the list goes on. Wheat IgE antibodies for wheat allergies, but non-gluten wheat proteins, fibrins, globulins, serpines, amylase, protease inhibitors. Now, I've always loved using Vibrant Wellness, And it's a simple test. It's a blood test. You go to a local blood, what do you call it? LabCorp type of place, or someone that's on the preferred vendors for Vibrant Wellness Labs. And you take this into them and they perform the wheat zoomer test sample for you and ship it off. Now, I think this is an important test because a lot of us do not correlate symptoms that we have and connect them with what we are eating. And today we're going to look at my lab result. And I've shared this in a video in the past, so check that out on my YouTube channel, The Low Carb Athlete, or you can look for The Fit and Healthy Aging Athlete, which I really want to call the podcast, but keeping it The Low Carb Athlete. So I have kind of two names for the podcast. I guess The Low Carb Athlete and subtitle is The Fit and Healthy Aging Athlete, as I am over 50 and a lot of you are getting older with me and you understand what I'm talking about. So 1 out of 7 Americans are somewhat sensitive to wheat. Wheat sensitivity may contribute to leaky gut, autoimmune disease, and neurological symptoms. Wheat sensitivity may damage the intestinal lining, causing further inflammation. Chronic inflammation is associated with serious disease, including heart disease, diabetes, cancer, arthritis, Crohn's disease, and ulcerative colitis. So we want to uncover if we do have a wheat sensitivity. It's easy test to do, as I said, and it's simple to create a nutrition plan based on the results and correlate with the blood chemistry test and a GI test and even a Dutch test. And then we figure out how to reduce inflammation and prevent disease. So you can learn more at vibrantwellness.com. I order tests through our FDN practitioner medical director program. And let's learn more about how you can be a health optimizer, because you don't know what you don't know. And I think a lot of us have some level of leaky gut, but when is that leaky gut becoming part of your main health problems that you can't figure out? So if you've been trying to do all the right things you hear about, maybe it's just with your nutrition, but you don't realize that you have hidden sources of wheat. And then we have leaky gut. And then we have all these random foods that we're eating that suddenly are tagged as enemies. And they are attacked and cause immune reaction in the body. And then we're under chronic inflammation. So if you don't know what leaky gut is, it's called increased intestinal permeability. It's a condition characterized by the weakening or damage to the lining of the small intestine. Normally, the intestinal lining acts as a barrier. This is controlling what substances are allowed to pass from the intestines into the bloodstream. But when the intestinal barrier, that's 1 cell thick, gets compromised, it can allow undigested food particles, toxins, and other harmful substances to leak into the bloodstream as LPS. And then we have endotoxemia. So several factors can contribute to the development of leaky gut. Of course, nutrition, what you are eating. So if you have a history of processed foods, refined sugars, inflammatory ingredients in those foods, and even if they're labeled keto or whatever food you're trying to follow, they're packaged foods and often filled with fillers. So you want to check the ingredient list and ideally eat nutrient-dense real food that doesn't have a label. But if you do, check out what you're having, as this may be contributing to inflaming your gut wall lining, causing leaky gut as your gut wall becomes compromised. Chronic stress. If you've been following me a long time, you know my history 10, 11 years ago. This year I had a huge breakdown and burnout of my body systems, this domino effect from living life as a race. And my life has never been the same since 2013 in February. So just know that if you're trying to do all the right things, but you're chronically stressed out, your body internally is going to be experiencing chronic stressors accumulating because of this prolonged stress from living life the way we do, can also disrupt the balance of your microbiome, your gut bacteria. And this disruption internally is now adding to your beaker of stress. You're getting more sources of chronic stress. Remember, they add up internally and externally. And this will increase intestinal permeability, leaky gut. Medications can disrupt the gut microbiome and contribute to leaky gut. So if you're on a lot of anti-inflammatory drugs, non-steroidal drugs, antibiotics kill off all the good and bad. So every time you're on antibiotics, I once heard that it takes 2 years to rebuild your microbiome if you're doing something about it. Remember, your microbiome is similar to a tropical rainforest. And when you take a round of antibiotics, you're blowing up that rainforest and you're killing off everything. So we get to have this cleared out rainforest and we have to replant the seeds to grow and bring it back to life. So environmental factors, those common and often unknown exposures to environmental toxins as pollutants, pesticides, especially if you're working in the yard and you're using that pesticide spray on your plants, trying to kill those weeds, you're getting that toxin in the air. And we're getting excess glyphosate in our environment. So these all will contribute to intestinal inflammation and compromise the gut wall lining, so that gut barrier function. But then there's also these underlying conditions that we can identify somewhat with the GI test and the wheat test. So celiac disease, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, these are all diseases associated with increased leaky gut. So leaky gut has been linked to, of course, a variety of health issues as food sensitivities. Because I said those foods you're eating all the time that might be really healthy suddenly are now tagged as enemies, as someone just had cinnamon, avocado, shellfish. They had scallops on there. I mean, it could be all this stuff that's good for you, but not right now. So we have to remove it for 90 days, get rid of the bad guys, heal and seal your gut. And we always start by making sure our liver is functioning at optimal level, make sure phase 1, 2, and 3 are functioning. That includes phase 3's elimination pathways that you're peeing and pooping and sweating and having good respiration system so we can get rid of those toxins and have a binder to get them out of the body, or else they're just recirculating in your body. So chronic inflammation can stem from a lot of things. Leaky gut can be a result of that, and usually I find is. So symptoms of a leaky gut vary, but typically bloating, gas, abdominal pain, fatigue, joint pain, skin problems, food sensitivities, the list goes on. So as we've heard for years from Hippocrates, that all disease starts in the gut. So we want to look at the gut health, but also not just addressing the gut, but starting north, work your way south. So how we eat, when we eat, why we eat, proper digestion, the enzymes, making sure our stomach acid is acidic enough, and we are properly breaking down and absorbing our nutrients and working on that gut health, that gut wall lining being nice and strong. So treatment is different for everyone, what we need to address first, but we want to address the underlying factor. Why do you have leaky gut? So just treating supplements for your gut wall lining doesn't always work. So perhaps we have to get rid of the gluten we're talking about today, wheat, but also the other food sensitivities that are now causing havoc, along with some possible pathogens, bad bacteria, and dysbiosis. So we want to support gut health, focus on what to eat, what not to eat, probiotics that are needed where you're lower, stress management, lifestyle modifications, prioritizing sleep, what type of exercise is best for you during time that might be stressful, so not doing hard stuff, identifying, eliminating your triggers. So knowing those food sensitivities are really playing a key role in healing the gut and reducing symptoms that we have associated with leaky gut. So let's go into my interview I did with Whitney Morgan and see what you think. Let me know. And okay, everyone, I'm thrilled to have Whitney, one of my mentors from our FDN practitioner program. And I'll go through all her certifications, trainings, and knowledge you have, Whitney, but you are coming on the show to talk about the Wheat Zoomer panel I've done on myself. And we're going to talk about gluten sensitivity and all things leaky gut for the athlete specifically, because we'll learn that there's so much information we can get from doing this lab test by Vibrant Wellness, or there's other tests, but this is one we love to do. And I think for athletes, we think we're invincible. We think we're training all the time, that we're fit and healthy. And often we are not healthy on the inside. And that endurance exercise can also impact our gut health. So we're going to talk about all of these things today, because I know everyone wants to lose fat, improve their performance, get stronger, get faster, improve that aging process. So Whitney, thanks for coming on the show to dive into the facts about our gut health and the impacts of gluten and wheat sensitivities.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Super excited.
So let's kind of talk about what is the Wheat Zoomer test that we're going to dive into. My test is a great example. And what is gluten versus wheat sensitivity to get started? Kind of what's it all about?
Sure. Yeah. So, I'm sure you've had this experience when clients come to you that they may have said, hey, my doctor checked me for gluten sensitivity and everything was fine. Well, the Wheat Zoomer is very unique. There's only one other lab that does a test similar to it, that it breaks apart the wheat protein and the gluten protein into all of its little pieces. These are called peptides. And it tests for the immune reaction to all the peptides of wheat and gluten. And the reason why this is so important is because you can test negative in terms of how you react to the whole food protein, but you can be having extreme reactions to the peptides of that whole food. And the way I explain it is, imagine the whole food is like a puzzle that's all put together and you can see the picture, right? And then you break that puzzle apart and all you have are all the pieces. Each individual piece of that puzzle is a peptide, and it's very unique in how it presents to the immune system. So if you really want to find out if you're wheat and gluten sensitive, you need to zoom in, which is why it's called the Wheat Zoomer. You need to zoom into the peptide level of sensitivity if you want the accurate data.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people hear about food sensitivity tests, and then they get that information, remove those foods that are ranked the highest, that they're inflammatory to the body, take that out for 90 days, then reintroduce them slowly. Yeah. But what is the difference between a food sensitivity test and a Zoomer? What can we get out of it? You just basically said a lot of it, but maybe more specific between the two.
Well, most food sensitivity tests out there are looking at whole food antigens, right? And when you're really reactive to a bunch of different whole foods, that actually says more about your digestion and your leaky gut than anything else. Because in theory, our immune systems should not really come into contact with a whole food protein, because your digestion should be breaking it down and it shouldn't be able to get through the gut lining, right, and go into the bloodstream. So if you have a lot of food sensitivities at the whole food level, it really means, hey, your gut's pretty leaky and your digestion probably isn't very good. So yeah, remove those foods for 90 to 120 days, improve digestion, heal and seal the gut. And in theory, you should be able to reintroduce most of those foods, not all of them, but most of them.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people might do that, and then they try to just go back to their old eating habits, and then they just get stuck to where they were 3 months before, or realize there's still symptoms, which can be far removed from actually what's going on. Like it could be skin issues or brain fog, migraines, and all these other different things that we don't correlate that goes with our gut health and what foods we're eating. So kind of go with the next step, I think, on that conversation would be leaky gut. What is leaky gut? And we call it leaky gut, but it's not really the true name. So let's kind of dive into what that all means and how it impacts our health.
Sure. So leaky gut just means kind of a hyperpermeability of the gut. It means that there's some dysregulation or damage to the gut lining. And so large, partially digested proteins or large toxins are getting through that normally wouldn't be able to get through. And if you think about the gut, most people think, okay, well, the gut's in my stomach. Well, no, it really runs from the mouth all the way to the anus, right? I mean, it's this one long tube, and it's our primary interface with the outside world. It really is exposed to the external environment, right? So we bring food and chemicals and all kinds of stuff into the gut environment. Well, that's why the gut lining is so important, because it's designed to keep the bad guys out while it, breaks down and assimilates all the good guys. And then what shouldn't get into the bloodstream passes through in the stool or goes to the urine, right? I mean, that's how it's supposed to work. Well, in leaky gut, it doesn't really work that way. We have these little holes along the way. Think of it as like, I know Dr. Tom O'Brien explains it this way. You have a screen in your window, right? It's supposed to keep all the bugs and stuff out. Well, if the screen is kind of broken down and you have these little holes and things get through, that's kind of how you can think about leaky gut, right?
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, most people are walking around with a leaky gut to some extent.
But how do we know if we have one or not without testing?
Sure.
We're just guessing, but what are some symptoms?
Right. So the tricky thing is that the symptoms can be just so diverse, right? You can have headaches, migraines, fatigue, inability to concentrate, just like foggy thinking. You can have irritability, anxiety, panic attacks. So those are all kind of neurological things. Then you can have joint pain, muscle pain. You can have classic digestive stuff like gas and bloating. You can have skin issues, so eczema, itching, various rashes, dermatitis, psoriasis, things like that. So the symptoms are just all over the map. But when you're trained as a clinician and someone's telling you all about their symptoms, you tend to get this picture emerging where you're like, oh yeah, that's a sign, that's a sign, that's a sign, right? And you get enough kind of red flags. And that's a good indication that, yeah, we should probably do some testing, because one of the primary triggers for leaky gut is the food that we choose to eat, right? And that's the thing we have control over. And then there's a lot of dietary and lifestyle stuff beyond that, like sleep and exercise. They impact the gut quite a bit.
Speaking of exercise, we were talking about this before we recorded, but the athlete, as I said, thinks that they're often, superhuman, invincible, because we exercise, we are healthy. But what I've learned over the years, and it kind of makes sense for what happened to me, is that we're training a lot. So you're doing Ironmans, marathon, long distance endurance work. We're putting a lot of time out there, and often training in hotter weather. And especially like I was doing Ironman in Hawaii every year, doing, races in Kona and different places that we don't know it, or I didn't know it, that I was actually increasing the damage to my gut wall lining and probably causing leaky gut, even though I thought I was so healthy, eating great food, doing lower carbs, not eating the crappy processed foods and sugars. But let's talk about the athlete, how they're not always good to have a healthy gut just because of their nutrition.
Yeah, and that's tricky, because most endurance athletes, like you said, they're used to training at high levels, and so what they think of as moderate exercise would probably, lay me out flat on the floor, right? So they're used to a different level of activity, and they've normalized it. But the thing is that, like, when I work with athletes, I talk about it this way: like, okay, well, if you're a marathon runner and you get a Achilles tendon injury or whatever, you get an injury that you can't train at that level anymore, and you have to actually do some physical therapy in order to get back to a place and heal where you can now adapt and train the way you previously were training. Well, it's the same is true when you're in this cycle of overtraining. It really damages the hypothalamus adrenal pituitary axis, right? The HPA axis. It damages the thyroid pathways as well, disrupts the endocrine system, absolutely increases oxidative damage, which breaks down the gut lining. These are all like little micro injuries, but we can't feel them. We can't see them. They don't have a specific location in terms of how they show up as symptoms in the body, right? So in order to really assess whether or not your level of exercise is putting too much stress on your body and kind of digging you into a hole, you really do need to collect the data. You need to look at your adrenal system. You need to look at your thyroid function. You need to look at those oxidative stress markers, those inflammatory markers. You need to look at a panel that shows whether or not you have a leaky gut, because it really is the data that that brings everything out into the light. Otherwise, we will never know until we reach that critical point where just the wheels fall off the bus. Suddenly, you're fatigued, you can't exercise, you have poor recovery, you're getting injury after injury, you can't think straight, and you're like, what the heck is going on with me?
That was me in 2013. I'm like, wait, you're describing exactly what happened to me. The wheels came off March 2013, and I had no idea that what I was doing years before that, just suddenly everything just fell apart and created metabolic chaos. We call it kind of the catch-all phrase for it, but it's my mission now to help other athletes avoid going through what I've gone through since, it's almost 8 years, that it's just so not spoken about, that athletes need to be aware of what you're doing now. Is it causing more damage than good? And how to take ownership of your health to be fit and healthy from the inside out, and doing this testing, because most people don't seem to be doing it as athletes. They just, follow their training schedule from their coach using Training Peaks or whatever, and just go by that. And they don't look at the whole picture until you are broken, the wheels fell off. But I want to help people before their wheels fall off. Maybe one wheel comes off and not all four.
Yeah. And really, in a perfect world, if you're like, okay, I'm going to be an athlete, that's my mission, that's who I am, well, then we should be running labs on you every year. We should be monitoring your adrenals. We should be monitoring your oxidative stress levels. We should be doing all of that, just like you do your annual blood work with your doctor, your CBC and your CMP, just for general health. Yes. If you are a high performance athlete, you should commit to a certain investment in terms of very unique, specific data that is going to impact the trajectory of your performance long term. And if you do that now, if you start doing that now and acting on that data, then it's less likely you're ever going to hit a wall where the wheels fall off, right?
Yeah. But people don't think that way. They just will drop 15,000 on a bike and their equipment, and they think nothing, like, $2,000 on some labs. No way. I'm like, well, how much were those race wheels that you're riding every week costing you? How much is that new bike? Yeah. So I just looked at a bike at truck store, and they're not cheap. They're at least $10,000. So, people won't do it. And it's hard to really teach people, don't wait until you're stuck in the hole and not be able to race. Like, I've never been able to do a marathon or Ironman again. And it's, it's not probably good for me anyways, but what if I wanted to do it once in a while? My body can't. But if you want to continue that and work on performance and longevity, we need to take ownership of our health and to do some labs, which I must add before I give back to you. I did current blood work with the doctor just because I'm paying all this ridiculous money for insurance.
Yeah.
I'll go get a checkup, and we haven't seen a doctor here yet. So I went, and I was so disgusted that I did lab work. They don't even do insulin. They do A1C, and they don't do insulin. They didn't do the inflammatory markers. They don't even do vitamin D. And then I got the results back on the portal from Kaiser, and they didn't go over them with me. I'm like, what? I know how to put them in our spreadsheet we use for FDN. I have on my little cheat sheet, what if it's high or low, and do all this stuff for myself. I'm like, no wonder why everyone's screwed up in our country, not being at optimal health levels, because their doctors just do this stuff and just leave them.
Yeah. Well, and you just said the magic word, Debbie. You said optimal health. That's not what those labs are for. Those labs are to identify disease and pathology. So as long as you land within these wide standard reference ranges, you're normal, meaning we can't diagnose you with anything. There's nothing wrong with that paradigm. We do want to be able to diagnose people when they fall into, extreme areas on the range, but that is not a paradigm that's set up to optimize your health long term. That's just not, you know?
I don't know. So anyways, this is a side note, but let's go back to the wheat zoomer. I want to go over why we test the wheat zoomer. We'll use my lab as an example because I went through my thyroid panel with Dr. Amy a couple months ago and just went through that. And I think it's important to look at this as an example of someone that thinks, they're eating healthy, they're doing intermittent fasting, they're doing their strength training, their yoga and all this stuff. And that's what I always say, what I do helping people is that I help people think they're doing all the right things and they're still not getting results to get their body environment self back. But let's go over the gluten test where it'll show wheat. Should we just pull it up and just get started and you can explain it as we go? So I'm going to share screens. Hopefully you guys watch this on the YouTube channel, Low Carb Athlete. And we can zoom into the zoomer.
Yeah. So can you see this okay?
Yeah. If you can make it can you make it a little bigger?
Yeah.
For us that are 50 now.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So the wheat zoomer is very cool. It's doing multiple things. We're looking at non-gluten sensitivity. We're looking at gluten sensitivity, leaky gut, and also wheat lectin sensitivity. So we've got a lot of different things going on. But the summary page, this gives you a score. Your wheat zoomer score is based on basically summarizing all of your results. So they have an algorithm that assigns a different weight to each antigen, right? So it's kind of like, think of it as taking a final exam. Your essay questions are worth more than your multiple choice, which is worth more than your true or false. So there are some antigens on this test that are weighted heavier. So I'm not sure what their algorithm is specifically, but you've hit the red zone, right? You are what we would call significantly or severely reactive, which means your exposure and your reaction are high. Then we have a separate intestinal permeability score, same sort of thing. It's an algorithm, and your summary score is also in the red. So very leaky, very wheat and gluten reactive. Then we have, this is the summary of the different antigens, what you were reactive to, moderately or positive, and then what you're negative to. So while we're on this page, you'll notice I just want to take a couple of seconds and talk about the difference between IgA and IgG. So IgA and IgG are two different aspects of our immune system. You can think of IgA as first responders. They're quick on the scene, quick off the scene. IgG take longer to form in the bloodstream, and they stick around for a long time. They stick around for up to 6 months in the bloodstream. And IgA usually leaves the bloodstream within 6 or 12 days. Okay. So these are both telling slightly different parts of the same story, right? So just looking at what you're reacting to, I can see, okay, well, you've got both IgA and IgG antibodies. That tells me that probably within the 2 weeks prior to this blood draw, you were exposed to, you had a gluten exposure or a wheat exposure. And that's why we're still seeing some residual IgA antibodies in the bloodstream, okay? The IgG reactions, well, that's telling me that you probably have had multiple exposures over the past 6 months, at least one, but probably more. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. The other thing that the wheat zoomer shows us is zonulin levels. Now, zonulin is an enzyme that regulates the tight junctions in between the cells that line our gut. These are like little gateways, and only certain things are allowed to pass through. So these gateways have to be very rigorously kind of regulated. So zonulin does some of that. Well, when we're exposed to gluten, zonulin goes up in the gut environment, and we get a lot of hyper dysregulation of those gateways. So think of it as, okay, those gates get stuck open or they start to get damaged and break down, right? So now we have in between each of the cells, we have these, gaping holes where there used to be tightly regulated junctions, okay? So the fact that your zonulin is elevated also confirms for me that, yeah, you probably had a gluten exposure in the period, leading up to the test, probably within 6 to 12 days of doing the blood draw. Okay. All right. So the wheat zoomer itself is broken into several different panels. These first two panels are specific for celiac disease. Now, celiac disease is different than being gluten sensitive or wheat sensitive. The way I like to think of it is wheat sensitivity is the big umbrella. Underneath that umbrella, you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity and you have celiac disease. And then, variations of that. But celiac disease is a specific type of gluten sensitivity that indicates that you now have an autoimmune process going on in the gut that's damaging the gut lining severely. It's an autoimmune disease that attacks the gut lining. That's how gluten impacts celiacs, okay? So these first two panels are telling us, is this person likely to have celiac disease? Obviously, you do not. Yours are both negative. Okay, so that's great. And I would expect that in most wheat zoomers because only 1% of the population has celiac disease. So most people that we're testing are non-celiac gluten sensitive. Okay.
Got it.
Now here's your intestinal permeability panel. Now you've got a lot of red here, right? You've got both IgA and IgG reactions to zonulin. You also have an IgG reaction to actin. So actin is a protein that supports the tight junctions and it supports kind of the cellular structure of the gut lining. So when you have antibodies to actin, that's an indicator that you probably have some damage of the cellular structure themselves. And so things are leaking through the gut, through the cells, not just through the gateways between the cells, but through the cellular structure, right? So you've got transcellular and paracellular leakage. Is that pretty clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing.
Yeah. This next panel is a transglutaminase panel. This is not gluten per se, but these enzymes are reparative enzymes that can correlate with autoimmune diseases of the brain and of the skin. Your panel is negative. That's good. Okay.
So then some people might see that moderate to high risk, and they might correlate that with any, like if they have psoriasis, eczema, or brain fog or migraines.
Yeah,
or
any sort of neurological symptoms. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the first page I think of as, okay, this is really autoimmune focused, right? Because all of these things increase or verify that you are at greater risk of autoimmune disease. Anyone with a leaky gut automatically is at greater risk of developing autoimmune disease anywhere in the body. Okay. Then we have our wheat germ agglutinin panel. Now yours is negative, and on most people, it's positive. So that's a little bit of good news. Wheat germ agglutinin is the lectin of the wheat protein. It's not gluten, right? And it's not just plain old wheat. It's a lectin. It's very specific. So lectins are pretty destructive to the gut lining. They break down the gut lining. When they get through the gut lining, they can go anywhere in the body. They can break down the blood-brain barrier. And wheat germ lectins follow sugar, right? So wherever sugar goes in the body, lectins can go too. And wheat germ is the big bad lectin of all the plant lectins because there's practically no tissue or organ in the body that wheat germ can attach to. So this is one way in which autoimmune disease starts. So it looks like this. Okay, wheat germ breaks down the gut lining, gets through, goes into the bloodstream, goes to the thyroid, attaches to the thyroid. The immune system is patrolling. It sees the wheat germ there and goes, whoa, you don't belong there. Bang, 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 bang. And then the thyroid tissue gets destroyed in the process as collateral damage. Now we have Hashimoto's.
Oh.
Okay. Same thing can happen in the brain with multiple sclerosis. It can happen in the pancreas, type 1 diabetes. It can happen in the joints, rheumatoid arthritis. Anywhere where the wheat germ goes, it can provoke an immune response that leads to an autoimmune progression. Okay.
Interesting. So people should look at their full thyroid panel to correlate the two together. And and if they have other symptoms of autoimmune.
Oh yeah. And most people who have been diagnosed as hypothyroid and they are gluten sensitive, most cases that person is actually Hashimoto's. They just have never gotten the diagnosis. Okay. All right. So then we have the actual gluten panels. So if you take the gluten protein, which is a big kind of clunky protein, it breaks down into all these peptides, gliadin peptides and glutenin peptides. Some people pronounce this gliadin, but anyway. So all of these peptides are gluten. If you put them all together, they would make up that gluten puzzle, right? So you're reacting to alpha gliadin, alpha beta, and gamma gliadin. You're also reactive to gluteomorphin, and then you have this high molecular weight glutenin reactivity. All of this just tells me you are gluten sensitive and you have had a significant exposure to gluten within 2 weeks before taking this test and probably several times within the last 6 months, right? Because your antibody levels are pretty high. Now, interesting about some of these peptides is that gamma gliadin tends to correlate more with neurological autoimmunity. Gluteomorphin tells me that gluten stimulates the opioid receptors in your brain. So for people who have these gluteomorphin or protonorphin reactions, they are actually addicted to the gluten, and they can, these are the folks that might stress eat. They might feel better if they have something carby. Maybe that's their way to kind of numb or self-medicate. But it also means that when you go off gluten, you can have physical withdrawal symptoms for several weeks, and you can get flu-like symptoms, achy, headaches, all kinds of stuff, and feel pretty crappy.
Hey, quick question.
Sure.
So that's IgA glutamorphin for me that was rated a little higher. But what about if you have history of, like, I just had a flashback of college when I thought I was being so healthy, doing everything fat-free, and all I ate really was bagels.
Yeah.
Bagels and rice and popcorn with water sprayed on it and Johnny's seasoning salt.
Oh my God.
I thought, fat-free diet back then. I was, high school graduate, 89. So it's been a while, but that's back then. We thought we were so healthy. But would anything we've been like, I don't know how you research it, but I'm just curious if you ate like the high carb diet and lots of wheat growing up, if that impacts some of these results as an adult.
That's a really good question. We don't know how long your immune system has been reacting this way, right? It could have been since you were a teenager, if we had this test back then, that it would have looked like this. Or it could be that, hey, you're an endurance athlete and you overtrained for a long period of time and systems were breaking down and your gut lining was breaking down and things were, you were in that metabolic chaos place, but you didn't know it. And then boom, now you've got this raging gluten sensitivity, so it could have happened at any point during your life. We don't know. All we can do is reverse engineer it, to the best of our ability based on your symptoms and your health history.
Yeah.
But something triggered it, and exercise could very well be the thing that did it.
Can you just step back a moment? So I think this is a good point because most athletes overtrain.
Yeah.
So overtraining, how does that give us a gluten sensitivity? It's not necessarily from eating so much gluten. You're saying you can become gluten sensitive because of overtraining, breaks down your body system because of the high stress, oxidative stress, and it breaks down your gut wall lining.
Yeah. So if you think of it as a perfect storm, right? So in order to reach like that critical tipping point, you have to have certain dominoes that get lined up, right? And so it could go something like this. You have a genetic predisposition in the first place, right? And hello, gluten causes a leaky gut in everybody, whether or not you're sensitive to it, because it raises zonulin levels. So if you go through your young teenage and early 20s, eating nothing but bagels and, the low fat, high carb diet with a lot of gluten, and you're also an athlete, then at some point along the way, whether it's a combination of, okay, your overtraining has impacted your adrenals, which has impacted your thyroid, which has slowed down your metabolic repair. It's dysregulated blood sugar. It's increased your zonulin. And you've got these gluten proteins swimming around. They get through the gut lining, and your immune system is out on high patrol because there's a lot of inflammation in the body and it's trying to protect you, right? And so you reach this point where the immune system just goes, okay, we have to protect ourselves. So now we're going to be hypervigilant, and we are going to clean up everything that could be a potential invader. And all you need are some of these peptides floating around in the bloodstream or attached anywhere in the body, right? Like wheat germ, anything like that. Then the immune system tags it. Once gluten is tagged as a bad guy, it's forever. So gluten is the only food we know of so far that creates these memory B cells. So whenever it's triggered in the body, whether you are 18 or 25, it doesn't matter how well you heal and seal your gut. Gluten is always going to be a potential immune provoker for you because it's encoded, it's wired in already, right? So this is forever.
I think it's such a good, everything you just said, people need to rewind and listen again, because I think most of us as endurance athletes would just think, people in general just think gluten-free lifestyle is just a trend. It's not for real. And they don't put that together. It's like, oh, my memory is horrible. I have total brain fog. My eyesight's bad. I've got, skin issues, and I take forever to recover from a workout. And for me, it was always like, I can't run. My running has never been the same. I used to be a fast runner. Now it's like slog. So I think putting that together, it could be some inflammation you're causing from what you're eating and then your gut health.
Yeah. I mean, I could say the same thing about when I, in my 20s. I mean, I wasn't an athlete like you were, but I was addicted to running, and I was running 90 minutes a day, 4 or 5 days a week. Wow. It was just ridiculous. So that I was definitely overtraining, but I felt pretty good. But shortly, I don't know, after like 3 or 4 years of behaving that way, then I started getting anxiety. Well, I didn't connect anxiety attacks to overtraining, nor did I connect it to all of the, whole wheat I was eating, the whole grains I was eating, right? Anxiety was the first symptom I had of my celiac disease.
Interesting.
Right? I had never had a digestive issue with gluten ever.
Wow.
So it's always been neurological and then skin. And that's pretty common, actually. It's called silent celiac disease. So I think that's part of the problem is athletes will start to get little symptoms like that. Like, hey, I'm having difficulty concentrating in school, or, I'm having trouble sleeping, or I'm getting anxiety attacks. They don't connect that to their overtraining or their diet, because these things are seemingly unrelated, but they're very related. Right?
Yeah. I've noticed that over the years, doing all these different educational programs. Like, okay, why do I keep studying and I'm not smart? How come I have to go over everything 100 times to get it in my head? That there's like, that's not normal. And you don't blame, that's just how my brain is. I'm just not a smart person and I'm not a slow learner. There's something else to go with it.
And two, I think, because of the way our medical system is set up, unfortunately, like in my case, I had anxiety. So what did I do? I went to the psychiatrist and the psychologist, right? Because obviously the problem is here. Right? In my brain. Well, no, it wasn't, but that's the way we're trained to do it. If we have pain in our joints, we go to a rheumatologist or a chiropractor or an orthopedist, or someone who specializes in the area where their symptom has manifested. But that doesn't mean that's the origin of the problem. That's so there is a disconnect in our traditional medical system, right? We mistake the symptom for the problem.
Yeah.
And that's just not always the case.
That's you. Was going to take it off my screen? Like, wait, that's your screen. So let's go on. I know there's so much cover in here.
So this is the final panel, and this is the non-gluten wheat panel. Okay, so these are not gluten peptides. These are wheat peptides. And you can see that you are reactive. You're reactive to the serpins and also the amylase protease inhibitors. Interestingly, amylase protease inhibitor reactivity does correlate with an inability to burn fat.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're an athlete that just no matter how much you train, you can't, get the scale to budge, and you're consuming wheat and gluten, this could be part of your problem. It's not your only problem, but it could be part of it.
I must say, since I started making sure there's no wheat in our house and doing strict gluten free, because I wasn't, it's pregnant or you're not pregnant theory.
That's right.
I realized that we still would have it sometimes if we eat out, be in food. But anyways, I haven't been able to lose weight, and I work out a lot. I lift weights and I, do fasting, blah, blah, blah. But finally, my body's starting to drop some inches the last few months after 8 years
Yeah.
of struggling, because I was lean and gained 30 pounds when my adrenal stuff's happened. And now I read that in our notes that, having this amylase, how you can start to lose weight. Plus it was supporting my thyroid and DHA, but it's just interesting how put it all together. It's like, it's just change the way you're eating, and you keep doing fasting and doing whatever low carb food plan, whatever your, eating is, and still don't lose weight. You think, what's going on with me? I'm getting older.
What's going on? And you kind of hit on the trifecta, which is gluten sensitivity, thyroid impairment, and adrenal dysfunction. Those three things just go together because they become a vicious cycle. Because food sensitivities, particularly a gluten sensitivity, which is kind of the mob boss of the food world, right? When that's going on, that has a huge impact on your adrenals. Okay. And then when your adrenals become, imbalanced, or there's dysfunction in your adrenal pathway, that has a spillover effect to your thyroid. It actually decreases thyroid hormone production, and it reduces the cell sensitivity for thyroid hormone. So thyroid hormone can't get into the cells. And then your metabolic function just kind of downshifts, right? So now you're riding the brakes. So now you're not burning fat. And that has its own, that's the thyroid dysfunction is its own source of stress for the adrenals. So it just keeps going around in this vicious cycle. Yeah. We don't see that all of those three things are connected.
Well, that's why I keep trying to say, you think you're doing all the right things, but it's still not getting any results. And the definition of insanity, I would say too, is that you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results and not looking at all this hidden internal stressors causing dysfunction.
Yeah. And even when it comes to people who do what we do, Debbie, which is we test, right? We don't guess. There's two kinds of health coaches in this world. There are the ones that test and use lab verified data, and they're the ones that guess. They might be really good guessers, but they're still just guessing, right? So if you're picking a health coach, pick one that tests, okay? Because you want the data. But also you have to look at a wide variety of data, because it's not enough just to figure out, okay, what foods am I sensitive to? Or, okay, how screwed up are my adrenals, right? No one test is going to give you the complete picture, because all of these systems in your body are connected. So you really do need to do at least 4 or 5 different significant labs, in my opinion, to get a good kind of global view of what's going on in the body, so that now you can develop a holistic, comprehensive plan to start turning the ship around, right?
Yeah, for sure. So on here, so we know the amylase and the serpines, but the serpines versus what's the other one? Pharmins. I can't see. Pharmins, and then the other ones at the bottom. Does it matter? Like if you just have one of those, like I just have one,
doesn't matter.
That means it doesn't matter. So it's just as long as one of them shows up on a panel, you are reactive.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. One peptide reaction is enough to say you are wheat sensitive. Just one of these peptides in either of these two panels is enough to confirm gluten sensitivity. Okay, so you are wheat sensitive and you are gluten sensitive. You do not have celiac disease. That's the only thing we can say that we can rule out based on this panel, based on the data we have. I could say with probably 90% assurance that you are not on the road to having celiac disease. Okay, not now.
So is that kind of stop to look at wheat versus gluten? Do we, if we have the gluten ones and not the wheat, but we still need to avoid wheat because the gluten's part of wheat? Does it make a difference, or tell us a little bit more?
It gets tricky in terms of application, right? How do you apply all of this data and live in the world, right? So when you go to restaurants and you buy food at the grocery store. So I look at these wheat zoomers all the time, not only in my private practice, but as a clinical advisor for FDN, I'm looking at other clinicians' wheat zoomer results and reviewing their cases with them. So I have the benefit of seeing a lot of these wheat zoomers that come through the FDN world. And from what I see, almost 95 to 99% of the people who are gluten sensitive are also wheat sensitive. Okay. So you can't really separate the two. Mm-hmm. This is really important for people who are out there eating those super green powders that are certified gluten-free, and these are athletes, right? Athletic greens, that's all over Instagram, right?
Athletic we've had that greens. For a couple of years. That has wheat in it?
It has wheatgrass in it.
Crap.
The last time I looked at the ingredients, it had wheatgrass. Well, you can't take the wheat out of wheatgrass, right? It might not have gluten in it because the wheat hasn't matured to the point where the gluten is developed, and they extract the wheatgrass in a specialized way that, right, that they can eliminate at least less than 20 parts per million the gluten, risk factor. So they can certify it gluten-free, but it's still full of wheat. So it's not good for you if you're gluten sensitive. You should not be consuming wheatgrass. No one should be if they're gluten sensitive, because 9 times out of 10, you're also wheat sensitive. I bet you.
Yeah, right.
yeah,
like
I know.
4 bags of that. So,
and there are even supplements. There are supplements that that a lot of health coaches use that have wheatgrass in them. Don't even go there.
Huh. Yeah. Interesting. I know when I order supplements now, I have to do the filter, and it's amazing how much nothing will show up.
Yes.
Sometimes what you're looking for, because there's wheat or corn and dairy and so many of those supplements that we take, and we have to be really cautious if we're reactive to it.
Yep. And it also means when you're reading labels, you have to be good at okay, yes, should you be buying things that are certified gluten-free? Yes. And those certified gluten-free products should not be produced in a facility that also processes wheat. So you have to look at the fine print, because something can be certified gluten-free, but still be contaminated with non-gluten wheat proteins due to manufacturing processes. So you kind of have to have this hierarchy of, right, of kind of investigating your labels, right?
Now, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you want it to be certified, but you also want to look at the fine print. Make sure that it's produced in a facility that does not process wheat.
Yeah, and that's hard to find. A lot of them are not. So when you look on my test, we look at the gluten, gliadin, and the glutenin, and then the wheat one. So I didn't show up for wheat, did I? But
yeah, you're wheat sensitive.
So the serpine.
You just didn't show up for the wheat germ.
Or the wheat germ. But how do you know I'm wheat sensitive?
Because these are all of the non-gluten wheat proteins. Non-gluten wheat. Yeah. The wheat germ is the lectin of the wheat.
That's right.
Right.
And that's what we hear a lot about, lectins.
Yeah.
From doctors.
So to further complicate all this, I just want to briefly say to people that gluten cross reacts with a variety of different foods.
Yeah.
Cow dairy, corn, millet, rice, baker's yeast, brewer's yeast, and oats. So those are the main ones. So if you are gluten sensitive and wheat sensitive, which you are, you either need to test yourself for those other foods, which I know you already did, and that's good. Or you should just eliminate them completely and just say, I'm just going to assume that I'm cross-reactive. I'm not going to eat corn or rice or millet or any of that stuff, right? Your safest bet is to go grain-free and adhere to a paleo or a primal template, because a lot of these grains they have so many different peptides that can confuse the immune system. The safest bet is just to get rid of them all if you really want to reduce the inflammation and the potential for other food sensitivities to crop up.
And that'd be a lot of the crackers that are out there, the wheat, they have the seeds in them, like Mary Gone crackers and like keto
Well, I think
crackers.
those are grain free, right?
They have to be grain.
Yeah, as long as you're opting for grain free stuff, you're a lot safer. But be careful. I mean, I've come across a lot of paleo stuff that's like quote unquote grain free, but yet it's produced in a facility that processes wheat. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You know, it kind of defeats the purpose.
But that kind of goes to why people do a carnivore 30-day reset, because what's there left to eat? Because you can't do dairy, you can't do corn, you can't do rice, you can't do lectin. So what's there left? Animal meat that's grass-fed and wild caught fish.
Yeah, some people have really, I think that kind of therapeutic intervention for short periods of time can be very healing for the gut.
Yeah.
Or you could just do an extended bone broth fast with collagen peptides. You don't necessarily have to, eat a bunch of animal flesh, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the best ways to kind of supercharge a gut healing protocol is to do a 3 to 5 day bone broth fast, because the cells in our gut turn over pretty quickly, right? And if we just stop bringing in food, if you're already a good intermittent faster, I mean, if you have the metabolic flexibility for intermittent fasting and you've got experience doing that, and you've done at least one 24-hour fast, I would say, hey, maybe experiment around with that and extend that to at least 3 days, somewhere between 3 and 5 days, because you're going to get a lot of gut healing.
Mm-hmm. We used to do that at my fitness studio, and I do it now. When I do my 5-day jumpstart challenge is teach people that and have that. And we did it before we really knew that much. We're doing it.
Right.
Angela Pfeiffer.
One thing I didn't mention that I want to make sure I say, and I would have mentioned it if you would have had a wheat germ reaction. Wheat germ is not only is it kind of a hormone signaling disruptor, and it sets the stage for autoimmune disease. It's super destructive in the body to tissues, but it also interferes with the absorption of vitamin D.
Yeah, I wrote that down. That was interesting.
So people with chronically low vitamin D levels, sometimes this is the culprit, and they're not going to fix that until they get off the wheat.
That's crazy. I know. I was so interested reading that. It's like, wait a minute, because I just got tested. I did get the doctor at least do my vitamin D, and I was only 44, which, I just had my dad finally get tested, and he was 20 something, and the doctor thought that was okay.
It's not okay.
That's fine. That's normal. You have heart disease and all this other stuff, but that's okay to have vitamin D that low. But mine, I thought, was still kind of low for being outside every day swimming. So I've been trying to do higher vitamin D supplements, but I think that's good information. Go look at your genetics, because I had the vitamin D receptor gene from both parents. I take vitamin D supplement once in a while, and I'm outside swimming at noon in San Diego sunshine 3-4 days a week. So why would my vitamin D still be low? Vitamin D, I would be interested to making sure I'm not having any wheat if that changes.
Right.
Even though my wheat germ panel wasn't bad, but good correlation.
Yeah, for vitamin D, the functional reference range is 50 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I think the sweet spot is 60 to 80.
Yeah.
That's where I like to see it.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. So, okay. So I know the rest of this, the test, when people do it, they meet with it. You have to order it through a practitioner, and you do go through it. And we do it part of our investigation program as FDN practitioners. So we go through all of it together. So we're not just treating a lab, we're looking at the whole picture.
That's right.
But if you scroll down when's the last page? Because it has great information. I know, like us as coaches, it does show us information, and, it's good information, but I think just for someone doing the test can learn a lot too. How it just gives a little summary. And like you tell us in our wheat germ program to save this information, because it's good info to look at the whole picture. But I think looking at IP, leaky gut panel, the potential risk related information and potential risk is good.
Yeah.
Kind of
and
overview.
then what we need to do to correct it, right? I mean, certainly the most important thing is to remove things that are breaking down the gut lining. That's the most important thing. But then above and beyond that, we need to put stuff into the environment that's going to help repair and soothe the damage. So that's where your probiotics and your L-glutamine and your L-arginine, your omega-3s, also things like slippery elm and marshmallow root and zinc carnosine. And, there are other things that usually are part of mucosal barrier formulas that do a lot of soothing, anti-inflammatory, healing, and repair activity.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I think that was interesting, and that gives more. But just last couple of minutes, I did do the Zoomer. So when we are ordering this for clients, as a practitioner side, I like to do the bundles, and I did the corn, the dairy. What I do?
Yeah, you did corn,
dairy.
You did corn and dairy. Yeah, you're gonna make it small so I can see. Squirrel. Yeah, corn. And you're reactive to corn, so you should consider corn as the same thing as gluten for you. But yeah, you did the dairy.
A pattern though with the corn, when people are wheat gluten sensitive, that they see the corn on there too, and they do the Zoomers. Is it because it's cross reactive, or is it corn as corn itself, or is it?
No, there are 3 different peptides of corn that specifically cross react with wheat and gluten. And I would say probably 85% or more people who are wheat or gluten sensitive are also sensitive to corn. And I think the same is true for dairy too. Those are the 2 main ones that I see most often. But when I run Zoomers on clients, I always run a minimum of 4. I always run the wheat and the corn, no matter what. If someone is consuming cow dairy, I always run the dairy. And then I'll either choose between the grain Zoomer or the lectin Zoomer, depending on the client, or I'll just do 5 Zoomers. If the money is there, if the client wants to get the additional data and wants to spend the money, I'll do 5 Zoomers. Because it's just, if all you do is the wheat Zoomer, well, okay, you find out you're wheat and gluten sensitive, but now I got to wonder, well, what about dairy and corn and the other grains that are cross reactive? Boy, I wish I would have gotten that data, right? And it's more cost effective to order all those Zoomers as a bundle than ordering the wheat Zoomer by itself.
So you're saying that it's a forever thing on the gluten to avoid, but what about dairy if it shows up on dairy? I mean, do you have to be dairy free forever? And that's cow dairy we tested. You can test
that's cow dairy. Yeah.
I mean, that's the hard one for people to probably absorb, that like forever ever. What if I go to Italy, and what if I go to France and I still can't do any of this?
Just go to Greece where they don't have cows. They just have goats.
Yeah, that's true.
They got some great cheese, man. Well, it's an interesting question, and I don't think we have that completely answered yet. All of that research is kind of happening in real time, but we do know that gluten is forever. And we do know that there are strong cross reactivities between corn and dairy and gluten, and we can verify whether or not you have those things. So then the question is, all right, well, if gluten is forever, and if the immune system looks at corn and goes, oh, that's gluten, does that mean corn is forever? Well, logic would say yes, right? Just your basic common sense would say, yeah, if your immune system thinks that every time you eat corn, you're eating gluten, or same thing about dairy, you probably should not ever eat those things again, But can I say with 100% certainty that that's true? No, but that's the best practice. That's what I would always recommend. Hey, if you can, be corn, dairy, and gluten-free. My house is corn, dairy, and gluten-free, my whole house. And that's just the way we live.
But I think it is like, sometimes you're going to go out to eat dinner, and how can you do, because it's not realistic to eat at home in a safe place all the time, because like I'm going out tonight actually with Reed.
Oh, yay!
We're going gluten-free restaurant, but it's not gluten-free kitchen. So like I'm going to go take my gluten enzyme pills that I can take before I eat, and digestive enzymes, and kind of be preventative. But what are some things you find that are important to do if you are eating out at a restaurant, because we are still going to hopefully live life and be social?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the enzymes are super important. I would say take both Wheat Rescue and Glutenza. Okay, both of them. Because they're going to break down, studies suggest they're going to break down 90% of the corn and the dairy proteins that you might come into contact with too, in addition to the gluten. So they're kind of all encompassing, even though they're marketed specific for gluten. They really do a good job at all of those inflammatory proteins. So take them both every time you go out for dinner. If you're in a new town, it's a little harder. You just have to, my rule is, if the restaurant doesn't have gluten-free options on the menu, I don't even go there. Because they don't have the language for it. They don't even, right? They don't have the awareness, or otherwise they will put it on their menu. So, and then you need to just talk to the kitchen staff, or to your wait staff. Hey, do you have protocols in place in the kitchen to reduce the risk of cross-contamination? You're never going to eliminate it, right? But ask them, what kinds of things are they trained to do to reduce the risk? I understand you can't guarantee me anything, but I'd like to know what your practices are. If you're talking about going out to dinner in your hometown, that's a little easier to do if you just like identify those 2 or 3 places that you really love to go. You develop relationships with the people, their practices, they know you. You have certain things that you order that you like, you have experience. If you have enough experience not getting contaminated there, right, then you know that it's a pretty safe place. So a lot of it is just trial and error, but get really good at just asking open, transparent questions of the wait staff, right? And doing your homework ahead of time. Don't ever go into a restaurant blind. At least go on Google and look at the menu and have a plan, right? And maybe the only thing you get to have is, a steak and some steamed broccoli.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So the one other thing I was going to say, there's a Find Me app I found, Find Me Gluten Free. So you can use it and it shows you where you are. So I used that last weekend when we were out of town. But I think it's also how to explain it to people without being made fun of, because people go like, oh, well, you don't have celiac, you're not going to die. So who cares? You're just being paranoid.
So this is the only time I would ever encourage people to lie. You just say, I have celiac disease. This is medically necessary.
Yeah, I thought that.
You don't have to, show a card. You don't have to prove it. Just, I have celiac disease. Because you're right, you can't spend time wading through their perspective of whether or not your condition is serious, right? You got to just speak the language that they are going to react to appropriately.
True. Just say celiac, because that makes more people know. Oh, no gluten in anything. I'll make sure I check everything, because if you say gluten, I'm reactive to gluten, it causes immune response in my body. They're like, what? Who cares?
Yeah, that's too many words, Debbie.
Well, I don't say that, but that's kind of what I've been finding to friends to say, because they'll be like, oh, you're full of crap. People in Italy eat wheat every day and they're fine.
But in Italy, they screen everyone for celiac disease.
Do they really?
Yep.
Wow. See, different. It's different over there.
Yeah.
So anyways, I know we're out of time, but where can everyone find you? You have a great program people can run through to learn more and to.
Sure. Yeah. I'm at Whitney Morgan Nutrition. You can find me at morgannutrition.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn as Whitney Morgan Nutrition. I specialize in Hashimoto's and thyroid stuff. That's kind of my jam. And so if folks are interested in learning more about optimizing thyroid health, I have a YouTube channel. And of course, all my stuff gets replayed on IGTV. And I think I gave you the link for a free download, which is my thyroid lab test interpretation guide. Yeah. So they can go to my website and download that and learn a little bit more about how to understand their own thyroid lab, so that when their doctor says everything looks normal, they can actually look at it and see whether or not that's true. That's important to understand your own lab work. Yeah, I think that is so important for everyone to get done, because I find it just from my own experience, and it's just amazing what is in those labs that you can get to really be healthy and feel your best every day, versus just, wait until they're like horrible in the function or normal ranges. Right. From the doctor's perspective. Right. And just like you did, I run these labs on everyone. Right. Mm-hmm. So anyone that I work with, I'm running a batch of Zoomers, and I'm doing gut tests and adrenals and thyroid and, the whole works. So I think that's really important, which is why we feel really strongly about the work that we do, that we need to get the data and treat everyone according to their unique needs, right? Because no one's data is the same. Their diagnosis might be the same, but their data is never the same, right? Everyone needs something different.
Yeah. And hopefully people start to keep getting these messages to know, like, all right, what I'm doing now, is it helping me for my future self? And if I want to live my best life, here are actions I need to take now, not wait until later when you're really struggling.
Yeah, because if you wait till later, it just takes longer to reverse engineer that stuff,
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah.
That's why I do what I do, right?
That's right.
Like, we don't want to have people have to wait. They could fix it in 6 months, not have it years to feel their best.
I hear you. I mean, that's why I do what I do. It's like, I don't want people to spend 15 years like I did trying to get my health back. That's crazy.
Yeah. I know. And I think all of us practitioners, we all have similar stories of struggling for years and, led us to FDN being a practitioner because we wanted to feel like this is my purpose now, to help people avoid going through what I done.
Absolutely.
And I feel like my niche is the athlete, the driven, ambitious, high performing athlete, because that's what I used to be.
Yeah.
And that, where I went from up here to down at the bottom, that, it didn't have to happen. So
exactly. Yeah.
People can learn. So thanks so much for your time and knowledge. And you're always so knowledgeable about everything. So I love to pick your brain and dive into things. So anytime
thanks
you want
for
to come
having
back
me. It was fun. Let's do it again.
All right. Anytime.
All righty.
So that was part 1 with Whitney. Now I have another episode where we dove into my results a little more, that I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to watch the video, because I think it's important to watch the video on this one when we can see the lab results. So why do we love the wheat zoomer? Well, remember, it's just one part of the formula when we're doing a health investigation. So it can be important if you have signs of leaky gut, chronic inflammation, because we identify specific triggers of that chronic inflammation and leaky gut can be caused or exacerbated by various dietary factors, sensitivities to specific parts of the wheat beyond just gluten. The wheat zoomer test can identify these triggers, allowing individuals to tailor their diet and avoid foods that may be contributing to your symptoms. So, as I say, you don't know what you don't know. And when I did this test, it completely freaked me out. My results were off the chart, and I really wanted to protect my brain health for my future self. So the test provides a comprehensive assessment of the reactivity to various components of the wheat, the gluten, and the non-gluten proteins. This evaluation, as I said, can uncover sensitivities that may not be detected through other tests, helping us pinpoint the exact dietary factors contributing to inflammation and leaky gut. So a personalized treatment approach by identifying specific triggers and getting an individualized program so you can get the results that you need, so we can manage your condition, remove the problematic foods that can help reduce inflammation. We can help you, give you the tools to repair your gut wall lining, to help you alleviate symptoms associated with leaky gut syndrome. And also you can learn how to prevent further damage. Untreated food sensitivities and ongoing inflammation are only going to get worse and progress leaky gut to make it more advanced stages, contributing to this constant cycle of chronic inflammation and digestion issues. And a whole downstream of events will result. So identifying and addressing the food triggers early on can help prevent further damage to the gut and promote healing as it becomes systemic. So a wheat zoomer is one part of the tests that we suggest doing, but for sure this is an important one to add if you can. So invest in your health and just know this is helping you improve the aging process, not just focusing on how your exercise routine is, but what you're eating is important, and identifying those foods that you might be okay to eat otherwise until we fix your gut. But you have to know what foods to avoid. As Dr. Grundy says, they're more like razor blades on your gut wall lining. So we need to go take a pause, reset, and work on that gut health. But you don't know what to avoid unless you test. And so food sensitivity along with the wheat zoomer test and a gut test is ideal, and then your blood chemistry panel, because we want to identify the causes or contributors. It might not just ever be one thing. It's root cause medicine, but we're looking at the whole picture. You don't know, chicken or egg, what you need, what happened first. So helping you create informed decisions, we can give you that information so you have those tools in your toolbox, how to make the best choices for what you are eating, and being a little bit more aware when you have this data. So let me know your thoughts, questions, and comments, and I'll put the links in the show notes so you can watch the video. Hey, my fellow aging endurance athletes, just a reminder, if you like what you listened to today, make sure to share this episode with your community. Head to debbiepotts.net to set up a free discovery call to learn more about my personalized coaching programs, especially if you are on a mission as myself to improve the aging process and start training to be my best self when I am 80, 90 years old. So I am on a mission to live my best life and be my best self the second half of my life. So if you're on the same mission as me, head over to my website and YouTube channel to learn more ways to improve the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.